The Archers Guild resides within Gridania, and so our adventurer approaches Athelina, the receptionist, to learn more about them. Gridanian archery was born of the two races that called it home, the Elysian with their long bows and the Mikote with their short bows. Although the two races did have a rivalry, they learned to live together and embrace their common love of archery. The guild was established to promote sustainable hunting, cooperation, and a mastery of their art. With the introduction complete, the adventurer approaches the guildmaster Lucian. With a bow in hand, the adventurer practices against the squirrels, ladybugs, and fangors that roam beyond the city gates, and Lucian formally admitted the aspiring adventurer as a fledgling archer of the guild. However, to be an archer is not a matter of simply shooting a bow. One must be vigilant of any trace of their target. To test his powers of observation, the adventurer is tasked with destroying several targets that have been placed throughout the city, and to attack a few more difficult monsters that have different battle preferences. With his power of observation established, Lucian reveals two mentors that the Archers Guild have been watching, and asks for their honest evaluation. Lei Aliepo and Mikote was fairly positive. She felt the adventurer had an innate talent, but that he never noticed she was there and therefore needed to improve noticing his surroundings. But then came Silver, the Elysian mentor who was once a member of the God's Quiver, an elite archery group that defends Gridania. He was not as kind and proceeded to criticize every aspect of the fledgling archer's technique. In his view, outsiders would never be able to understand their art. This did not faze Lucian, who still believed in the talent she had seen as well. She instead asked Lei to guide the new archer in his journey, and so Lei Aliepo tasked the adventurer with seeking out targets to destroy, but this time within the 12's Wood. The adventurer proceeded to destroy each target, taking care not to enrage nearby enemy monsters. Lei was impressed enough and asked for the adventurer to assist with culling beasts that have been growing in numbers and causing trouble at the honey yard in the East Shroud, a request made by the conjurers and hearers of Stillglade fame, whom have an affinity to hearing the plight of the 12's Wood. Although the Conjurers Guild would normally handle such matters themselves, these particular creatures could cause trouble for those using the magical arts. The adventurer of course had no trouble with this task, as Lei determined when he returned with a smug expression on his face. With this, Lei recommended he share her progress with Lucian, which Silver overheard. He grew quite angry at the thought that Lei had entrusted the security of the 12's Wood to an outsider. It certainly seemed as though it wasn't just strangers that Silver disdained. He wasn't too keen on Lei either. However, Lucian ordered him to stand down, that he come to terms with the adventurer's presence and rising skill, and ordered Silver to be his next mentor. Silver reluctantly agreed. Very reluctantly. After all, how could an outsider hope to understand the art that the Wildwood Elysian have been developing for centuries? Silver asked the adventurer to destroy targets in the woods. The adventurer frowned. This was the same task Lei had asked him to do. Silver noticed the frown and rebuked his exercise was greater in difficulty and would require the adventurer to think more about where the nearby beasts will be. The adventurer completed this, but Silver was not impressed. Only a merely passable performance, nothing to be proud of. But if the adventurer was so intent, he might as well head to the North Shroud, where Ixali scouts were sighted west of Etod's Spire. Surely, Silver remarked, he would not need to point out this was an act of aggression. The Ixal and the Gridanians have conflicted for centuries. If the adventurer was so talented, he should be able to fell their leader, Netzalcatlan the Violator, and Silver would finally accept this as proof of belonging within the Archers Guild. And so the adventurer went on to find the Ixali scouts, taking each on with swiftness. During this task, he encountered a lancer. This was Muradon the Matter, a soldier of the Woodwellers who had been patrolling nearby. Together, they defeated the Ixal, and the adventurer returned to Silver, who was flabbergasted. He stated this was pure luck, but he was a man of his word. He would stop trying to drive away the adventurer. Whether he remained in the guild or not would no longer be something he would concern himself with, and he bid the adventurer to report to Lucien now that the adventurer was no longer his responsibility. Lucien praised the adventurer, while Lei pointed out this was not a training exercise. Silver had put a new adventurer, albeit a talented one, into a potentially lethal conflict. She believed Silver hoped the adventurer would fall in battle, and yet still refused to acknowledge his skill upon returning. Lucien disagreed. Although Silver was not using actual words of praise, it was clear to her that he noticed the adventurer's skill in the way he spoke. Instead, Lucien asked the adventurer to assist in a new matter, a request from the proprietor of Buscaron's druthers. A gang of poachers needed to be dealt with, and she would like the adventurer, Lay, and Silver to investigate. Silver disagreed vehemently, stating he should go alone, but Lucien insisted not only that he go, but that he start recognizing the adventurer as an archer. Silver refused, and Lay reprimanded him, which only led to him calling her a savage. Lucien had enough. This spat would end, and all three would go and investigate right away. They made their way to Buscaron, and Silver questioned why their assistance was even needed. Poachers are not uncommon, and although undesirable, they are not generally worth involving the guild. However, these were not common poachers. They were part of Pawa Mujuk's gang, and he believed that she and her gang were still nearby. Pawa Mujuk was the most infamous poacher to ever walk the 12's Wood after all, and tremendously skilled with a bow in her own right. She had once been apprehended, but had tricked a young sentry into releasing her. However, due to territorial conflicts with the Red Belly Bandits, Buscaron couldn't send his people out to search for her. Likewise, if he asked the Godsquiver Bow or the Wood Whalers, the two protective forces of Gridania, this could break the peace pact he has with the bandits. The Archers Guild, not being an official protection force, would be a more neutral party to involve. The three archers each went their way to search for clues and returned. The adventurer had located an iron leg trap, a poacher's arrow, and some bottles of mead. This didn't seem like much proof, and Lay would prefer such matters were left to the Godsquiver, as long as they did not implicate Buscaron, especially if Pawa Mujuk had really been there. Silver disagreed. This was a matter of Gridanian security, and the Archers Guild is just as responsible for it as those other parties, and he believed the reason she couldn't understand that was because Lay is a vagrant, not understanding the love one could have for their homeland. The adventurer stepped in. Now was not the time for yet another spat, and instead they should reassess the clues they had found, specifically the bottles of mead. Silver believed them to be rubbish, as the bottles were so old they predated even the Buscaron's druthers. However, Lay pointed out that they still smelled like mead. Old bottles would have lost that smell by now. They had to have been opened recently. Silver recalled that Buscaron was brewing his own stock even before he built his establishment. If there had been some leftover stock somewhere, perhaps at Buscaron's car, his old lookout post. The three headed there, but the lookout post had been destroyed, and there were fresh tracks nearby. Whoever had taken up residence had fled, or were hiding. Silver heard a sound. It was the sound of a bow being tugged, and warned the others to take cover. Sure enough, an arrow had been aimed at one of them. The three took cover, but could see and hear Pawa Mujuk. Lay split up, hoping to be able to surprise the leader while Silver and the adventurer stayed behind to handle her crew. The crew had many members, but the two of them were able to fight them off valiantly. Thus they looked for Lealiapo, who had caught up to the leader and was facing off in a battle with the bows. However, Pawa's accuracy was fearsome, and she was able to knock Lay's bow out of her hands. This was Pawa's opportunity to be rid of one of her investigators. Thankfully for Lay, Silver had caught up and was able to distract Pawa through a well-timed arrow. Pawa realized she would currently be outnumbered and fled, for the time being. The three returned to Buscaron. With Pawa's identity and return confirmed, he had no choice now but to involve the proper authorities, and he would have to simply manage his relation and peace pact with the Red Belly Bandits carefully. With this matter no longer in the hands of the guild, Lucien has a separate request to ask the adventurer, to help his mentors gain perspective so that they may overcome their animosity for one another. First, the adventurer reached out to Silver, who apparently wishes to leave the guild once he tracks down Pawa Mujuk, as he did not feel it was right to leave it to others to handle, especially since, apparently, the Godsquiver and Wood Whalers did not seem to place this as a priority. He would not let her escape. Not again. As it was him that let her escape the first time. When he was a younger sentry of the Godsquiver, he had fallen for her cries about a wounded comrade. He needed to reclaim his honor and protect Gridania. Silver then told the adventurer he should check on Lay, as she was moping around. Not that he cared, of course not. And so the adventurer approached Lay, who seemed a little homesick. She was a stranger to Gridania too, as she came from a smaller village of the 12's Wood. But when the calamity came 5 years ago, she took refuge in the city. Although it was not stated, it seems she may have lost all of her family during the events of the calamity, and found herself alone in Gridania, until a few years later found herself within the Archers Guild. After being bested by Pawa, Lay was doubting herself. maybe Silver was right and this place was no home for an outsider. She too had decided to leave soon, but after she had a chance to meet with the adventurer alone in their south shroud. At the meeting point, 2 archers appeared, and Lei stepped in to ensure the adventurer would not be harmed. These were Pawa's lackeys, and Pawa Mujuk herself had shown up as well. It seemed she had invited Lei for a talk. Pawa had not, however, invited the adventurer, but Lei explained that this was another outsider and she merely wished to say goodbye, as she was willing to join Pawa's gang. At least there, she would be with other Mikote of the woods, with their archery, and not Gridania's archery. She bid the adventurer goodbye, and asked that he not let the others know, as they would not understand. Then, Pawa ordered her gang to shoot the adventurer, to Lei's surprise and protest. Surely, if she was done with the Archers Guild, she would not mind if one of them was gone. But Lei did mind, and thus she failed Pawa's test. Pawa Mujuk had no need for an archer without the resolve to do what was needed, and would not allow Lei to join after all. But she did let the 2 of them live, as she left without harming them. Lei could not understand herself. She didn't belong with the band of misfit Mikote, but she also did not feel as though she fit with the mostly Ellison Archers Guild of Gridania. But the adventurer did not seem fazed by Silver's remarks, as the adventurer's skills increased so dramatically, so why was it that she couldn't be like him? What did she lack? She could only think of one way to find out and invited the adventurer to meet with her elsewhere, at the Bannock, which served as a training area. She did not wish to talk. No. Lei wished to fight the adventurer, to see the difference in their archery abilities. After the battle was over, Lei realized the difference. The adventurer heeded his master's teachings, while looking beyond their faults. Even Silver, for all his bigotry, wishes only to preserve his traditions. The reason she failed to improve as quickly as the fledgling adventurer is that she too was holding on to tradition, the ones she had learned from her own family. However, she realized that the Archers Guild was her family too, if she would let herself accept that fact. Upon returning, Lucien was glad to see Lei seem cheered up, but Silver was in a frenzy. He wished to seek out poachers and try to find Pawa's location now, without waiting on the other Gridanian forces, before she had a chance to flee. Lei insisted it would be too dangerous. At least let her and the adventurer assist. Silver rebuked this idea. How could she understand? But she did understand what it meant to want to protect her home and feel guilty if she could not. She begged for Silver to see that in her. While holding his hand by his mouth, he stated that they were not friends and left. But Lei saw through that lie. Perhaps he wanted to protect them because he knew it would be dangerous. Lei and the adventurer went after Silver, who was running after encountering the poachers he had gone after. He once again insisted they not come. This time, Lei said it out loud. Archers have keen eyes, and she could see his lies. Lei and the adventurer protected Silver while he recovered, as the poachers closed in on them. Yet Silver remained stubborn and wished them to leave. This was enough for Lei. After all, when he covers his mouth, it's a tell that he isn't saying what he means. She repeated the Gridanian teachings of archery, discern your subject's unique characteristics, and recognize patterns in his behavior, and it was clear he was lying to protect them. But this could get him killed, and darn it, she needed him to stay alive so she could keep learning Gridanian archery. Finally, Silver acknowledged her, and he joked he could at least fix up her form. He then proceeded to finally include them in his plan. He would use a bone whistle to lure Pawa out of hiding, as such whistles are used by poachers of the Tollswood. This was the reason he was seeking out these unrelated poachers, to take their whistle. He would ask the adventurer to be the bait near where Pawa was last seen, while he and Lei would guarantee his safety from the shadows. Sure enough, after using the whistle in the stated place, a gang of poachers came out, and it was Pawa's. Meanwhile, Lei and Silver shot arrows at some of them to try to disarm them. Pawa and her gang went on full strike. Lei and the adventurer focused mostly on her lackeys, while Silver went after Pawa. Although Pawa had brought oiled arrows that could burn the ground it landed on, the adventurer dodged them and spread out the fire, so that the 3 could keep taking her down. Pawa was at a loss, and realizing this, she fled. Hidden from behind a tree, she saw the adventurer and tried to take a shot at him, but heard a voice from behind. It was Silver who had spotted her. Moving her attention to him, she failed to realize that Lei had come up behind her, and thus was taken down by her arrow. Injured, she could no longer attempt to flee, and finally, she was apprehended. Lucien was relieved to hear this. Not only was an infamous poacher taken away, but also, had the 3 of them failed to reconcile their differences, they would never have been able to coordinate such a capture. Not only had the adventurer been a keen student of their art, he had helped his mentors regain the perspective they had lost. The end. I do hope you enjoyed this storytelling of the Archer questline. This was a tale about acceptance. Acceptance from Silvera that his traditions are not being infringed upon by recognizing the skill in others. Acceptance from Lei that Silvera, while disrespectful, is only behaving out of love for his heritage, and that she should try to understand him. Acceptance that although she lost her home, she could make a new one within the halls of the Archers Guild. Sometimes, a little bit of understanding and compassion, towards others but also to oneself, can go a long way. But yeah, I do believe that marks the end of this A Realm Abridged storytelling. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do make sure to hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. Also, be sure to let me know what the Archer questline means to you in the comments, and if there are any stories you would like me to cover next. A big thanks to all of you for joining me down memory lane within the world of Final Fantasy XIV. My name is Squintina, and I hope to see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy XIV story. Do feel free to share this around to the people you know who love this game just as much as we do.